The night my roommate's mom offered me a spare room, I thought she was just being kind. But moments later, she leaned closer and whispered something that completely changed the way I saw her, and myself. What happened after that would force me to confront my deepest fears, heal old wounds, and discover a truth about love and loneliness that I never expected. Stay with me until the end, because this story isn't what it seems. The rain had been falling for hours when I unlocked the apartment door. My clothes were soaked, my shoes squished with every step, and my mind was exhausted from another long shift at work. Life hadn't gone the way I imagined. At 27, I had no family nearby, no relationship, and barely enough money to cover my share of the rent. My roommate, Jake, was usually the one bright spot in the apartment. He was funny, dependable, and somehow always knew how to make difficult situations feel manageable. But that evening, the apartment felt strangely silent. A note sat on the kitchen counter. Gone home for a few weeks. Mom's recovering from surgery. Call if you need anything. I sighed. Now even the apartment felt empty. For years, loneliness had become my shadow. It followed me to work, sat beside me during dinner, and waited for me every night when I returned home. Most people think loneliness means having nobody around. They're wrong. Sometimes loneliness means being surrounded by people who never truly see you. Over the next few days, I worked, slept, and repeated the cycle. The silence grew heavier. Then one evening, Jake called. "Hey man, how are you holding up?" "I'm surviving." He laughed softly. "That's not the same thing." I didn't answer. Because he was right. After a pause he said, "Mom wants to talk to you." I frowned. "Your mom? Just say hi." A familiar warm voice came through the phone. "Daniel?" "Hi, Mrs. Carter. Jake tells me you've been working yourself to death." I smiled weakly. "He exaggerates." "No," she replied gently. "He doesn't." Mrs. Carter had always been kind. The kind of person who remembered birthdays. The kind of person who made extra food because she worried someone might be hungry. The kind of person who somehow made every room feel safer. We spoke for nearly an hour. When the call ended, I felt lighter. For the first time in weeks, someone had genuinely listened. A few days later Jake called again. This time his voice sounded serious. "My mom wants you to come visit." "What? Just for the weekend?" I laughed. "That's weird." "Not really. She likes you." I hesitated. The truth was I desperately needed a break. Eventually, I agreed. 3 days later I arrived at their small house outside the city. The place felt warm immediately. Fresh bread filled the air. Pictures covered the walls. The sound of laughter drifted from the kitchen. It felt like something I hadn't experienced in years. Home. Mrs. Carter greeted me with a hug. Not a polite hug. A real one. The kind that says you're welcome here. The weekend passed quickly. We shared meals. Played card games. Talked late into the night. For the first time in years, I wasn't counting the hours until bedtime. I wasn't thinking about work. I wasn't thinking about bills. I wasn't thinking about everything I'd lost. Then on Sunday evening, a storm rolled in. The roads flooded. Travel warnings appeared everywhere. Mrs. Carter looked out the window. "You shouldn't drive tonight." "I'll be okay." "No." Her voice carried a firmness I'd never heard before. "You'll stay here." I glanced at Jake. He shrugged. "Listen to Mom." She smiled. "You can use the guest room." Then she paused. For a moment, her eyes seemed to see straight through me. Not my clothes. Not my smile. Not the version of myself I showed everyone else. The real me. The lonely me. The exhausted me. The hurting me. Then she quietly whispered. You don't need to sleep alone. My heart stopped. I stared at her. Confused. Shocked. Unsure what she'd meant. Before I could respond, she added softly. Not when you've been carrying everything by yourself for so long. Suddenly I understood. She wasn't talking about sharing a bed. She was talking about something much deeper. She was talking about loneliness. And somehow she had recognized it immediately. That night I lay awake in the guest room staring at the ceiling. Thinking about those words. Thinking about how long I'd convinced myself I didn't need anyone. Thinking about how wrong I had been. But I had no idea that the biggest challenge was still waiting for me. The next morning began with panic. My phone rang repeatedly. Work. I answered. The company was downsizing. Half our department was being eliminated. By lunchtime, I no longer had a job. I sat alone on the back porch staring at the fields beyond the house. The future looked terrifying. Rent. Bills. Responsibilities. Everything crashed into me at once. Mrs. Carter found me there. She sat quietly beside me. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally she asked. How bad is it? I told her everything. The job loss. The financial struggles. The loneliness. The fear. Years of bottled-up emotions poured out. When I finally finished, I felt embarrassed. Weak. Broken. But she simply nodded. Then she said something I'll never forget. Daniel, strength isn't carrying everything alone. I looked down. She continued. Strength is allowing people to help carry the weight. Tears filled my eyes. Because nobody had ever said that to me before. Not my father. Not my friends. Nobody. Over the next few weeks, Jake and his mother refused to let me isolate myself. They invited me for dinners. Introduced me to neighbors. Encouraged me to apply for jobs. Little by little, life started moving again. One afternoon Mrs. Carter handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter. Written years earlier by her late husband. A man I'd never met. The letter spoke about kindness. About community. About choosing people over pride. At the bottom, one sentence was underlined. No one was meant to face life alone. I stared at those words for a long time. Because they described exactly what I'd been doing. Facing life alone. Fighting every battle alone. Suffering alone. And it wasn't making me stronger. It was making me miserable. That realization changed everything. Months later, I found a better job than the one I'd lost. I moved into a new apartment. Made new friends. Started building a future. But the most important change wasn't external. It was internal. I finally allowed people into my life. I stopped treating vulnerability like weakness. I stopped believing independence meant isolation. 1 year later, Jake and I sat on the Carter family porch watching the sunset. Mrs. Carter brought out lemonade and smiled. You look different. Different how? Happier. I laughed. Maybe. She shook her head. No. Definitely. And for the first time in a very long time, I agreed. Because happiness hadn't come from money. Or success. Or achievement. It came from connection. From belonging. From understanding that even the strongest people need others sometimes. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, I thought back to that rainy night. The night she whispered. You don't need to sleep alone. Now I finally understood. She wasn't offering me a room. She was offering me something far more valuable. A place in a family. A reminder that loneliness isn't cured by walls or beds or houses. It's cured by people who choose to stay. Sometimes the people who change your life aren't the ones you expect. A simple act of kindness, a listening ear, or a welcoming home can heal wounds that years of struggle never could. No matter how strong you are, no matter how independent you've become, remember this: you were never meant to walk through life completely alone. The courage to accept love may be the greatest strength of all. And if you've ever felt alone, ask yourself this question: what if the person who could change your life is already standing nearby, waiting for you to let them in?